Hello, and welcome to the Kink Perspective. My name's Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. On today's episode, I want to talk about kink educators in the community leaders. Those people that we turn to that seemingly have tons of experience, yet more often than not are starting to plague the community in a bad light. Now, I'm not talking about all kink educators, unfortunately, but ripping things like I tend to do when I'm looking around social media websites like fetish.com or alt or even FetLife, more and more often we're seeing stories coming out about how local kink educators groomed me, or they use their position of power to violate somebody. I don't want to get into the criminalities of things because I'm not here to debate law. I'm here to discuss the facts and what we know. Most recently, I've come across a couple of articles talking about members of the kink community that, act as leaders, act as community organizers, act as, educators. Now, we need to come to an agreement on something here, and this is where a lot of people seem to disagree, but let's be realistic for a moment. There is literally no such thing in our community as a kink certified trainer. There is no such thing in our community at all as a kink certified educator. And I'm not talking from the standpoint of sexuality, where we're talking like a certified clinical sexologist or sex therapists, or someone like myself that's a psychotherapist, or clinical psychologist or psychiatrist. I'm not talking about those people. Those are highly educated people. We've spent years upon years in school. We've done our research. We've done dissertations or master's thesis. We've put our education and our time in. We've gotten good in our field. We tend to focus on one or two things and go off into the world and hopefully try to help or do research. When it comes to the area of BDSM, the one source of contention all the time is that, and I've spoken about this before, kink is like a religion. We make this up along the way. There is really no steadfast guidelines, steadfast rules. There is no kink authority. There is no kink council, dom councils. No, none of that. Even when in my early days, when I heard about these types of things, what was interesting is like, oh, that sounds really good. If there's a problem, these people can help intervene. They can make a ruling. They can decide. But ultimately, we're giving these people power over these things. We're deferring any of our judgment, our better notions, to people who have more experience. And so that's what we're really coming down to and talking about. Now, I'm not saying somebody who is, 19 years old, who has been, practicing rope for, as long as they've been legal. So depending on the country, anywhere from 16 to at least 18 years of age, they've got some experience. What I tend to start having problems with is that we are promoting people, and there's no real certification behind it. So what are we actually getting with our information when we're putting our trust into listening to some of these people? We're endowing them, we're empowering them with so much more, right? We end up giving these people all of our attention and we say, yep, we're going to listen to you, we're going to buy into what you're saying. You have no credentials. I mean, there is, like I said, there's no kink governing body I can go to and take a 12-week seminar that then I can get a certificate and go, cool, I'm kink knowledgeable. Wonderful. I can get the same type of training and print out the certificate on my computer. That doesn't do anything for us. That doesn't make anyone safe. I have often said this phrase as well. I've been repeating it over the last few days. I've had a conversation about it last night. Safety is something that only occurs between our ears. It's not something we can hold in our hands. Now, risk and all of these things, we can assess and prep for as many risks. But I don't want to digress here too much. I really want to kind of stay on this line. So this is kind of a two-parter deal here, because first I want to talk about people who are these kink educators and the complete awe that we're giving into them. And I'm not saying that some of these people don't have wonderful information. This is how we learn. This is how we go about and evolve our craft in the community. This is where we go to gain more information, to maybe watch how a new scene is conducted, or to use a new implement in a way we never thought of before. Or for those, for example, that are in an edge or needle play, they're seeing new designs and patterns they never once thought of. These are usually done by people who have quite a bit of time in the community. And then we come to the online educational portion of all of this. And we look at all these people putting up all of these classes, and we're thinking that they're out there and they've got a lot of reviews and people are happy. But at the end of the day, this, and I'm going to say something that probably some are going to think is controversial, but I believe this is true. When it comes to BDSM, and I'm not talking about the emotional component that I can sit here and evaluate, and I can talk about impact of disorders or people's lives and how it's affecting them. What we do in the BDSM community is absolutely 100% unequivocally subjective. I want that to sink in for a moment. Everything we do here is subjective, because there is no law, there is no rule, there is no guideline, there is no manual about how we do things. Now, we do know some things that are objective, meaning factual. Right? If we spank somebody in the wrong place when we're doing an impact scene, it can hurt them. Right? But it's subjective to say how many spanks is going to get somebody off, or how many spanks is going to redden a bottom, or how many spanks a masochist is going to like. That becomes subjective. It becomes subjective when we talk about people who engage in sadism and masochism and what their protocols and beliefs are for the community. I have some really nice people that I follow, and I respect their wishes for not wanting to come on the show. I think they know who they are, and if not, but they're a wonderful couple in Canada who I follow. But the protocols and rules that they follow, they have developed with some guidelines I'm sure they picked up through the community, but then they manifested the rest of their rules and everything that works for their own dynamic. But yet again, and I'm not picking on them, I adore them. The dominant, he has a wonderful mind. He's an incredible sadist. His artistry is beautiful. I have had many conversations with his submissive, very articulate person, down to earth, caring and considerate, but what they do is between them. And the only reason why I'm using them as an example is because at the end of the day, what they still do is subjective. There's not a roadmap, right? This isn't a video game with an endpoint. We continue to evolve our craft. It's why we tend to start pushing our limits and get involved in other scenes and things that we want to explore. Because the further down the rabbit hole we go, the more we want to push ourselves. So then we start looking for people. And yep, this is a good time to start talking about people who are quote unquote experts. Now, there was a time that I had went to a DomCon in Atlanta, and there was a bullwhip master. And he has something like 40 years working with a bullwhip. I would probably call him an expert in his field, because this is all he does. And he would put on demonstrations of how he was using the bullwhip on somebody's skin, how precise he was. I watched him explode an apple off the top of his slave's head. So I would probably put a lot of stock when I'm listening to somebody like that about their particular craft. I put even more stock into when he was talking about that it wasn't for the faint-hearted. You have to understand all of these things. You can't just dive right in. You actually have to train. And that he offered classes on how to use that. That would be somebody who, again, would be an educator. However, there's still no certifications with some of this. And so we put all of our faith into these people, and then what ends up happening? Some of these people who fall under the guise or use this terminology of, I'm a kink educator, pay me for my class, to give out subjective information that at the end of the day, I can't call it misinformation because, again, I don't like that term. We've been throwing this term around for so darn long, especially with everything going on in the States and the media. But the reality is, their information is just subjective, the things that they like to do. You can't tell me, I can't tell you, for the things that I like to do, that works across the board. Because for many of you, for example, I'm a sadist. And while some people ponder, how can a therapist be a sadist? Well, we all have our kinks. But the reality is, the things that I do with the person I engage with is going to be different than the people that I was referencing potentially in Canada, or some wonderful people that I know down in Australia who have had a couple conversations with privately or publicly, or I've interviewed on my show. But we all don't follow the same pattern. We do adhere to some rules and protocols and rituals. Absolutely. We can teach those that we have adopted and teach our methodology to other people if they are willing to accept it. No matter how many times some people want to fight against that and they don't want to follow those rules, absolutely, I totally get it. But then when what happens is as we evolve, we're starting to see more and more predatory behavior come into the community. Now, I've been commenting and using something lately, or stating something lately, where I've been calling this is where Tinder's trash has now really kind of come into places like Alt or Fetish.com, FetLife, right? The conversations are extremely or overtly graphic. They are usually sexual in nature. And as a comment I made to somebody recently, I said the reality is people in our community don't talk like that to each other. We're actually quite respectful, and we have to understand the nuances of when we're getting to know somebody. Vice versa, if I'm approaching somebody and I'm having a very pleasant conversation and I'm watching how they're reacting to my conversation, I can tell how much time they've had within the community or if they're serious about it. But when we get into the fact that we're talking about grooming through kink educators and we're looking at these people, and I'm not saying all people who claim the title of kink educators are grooming or are predatory or are looking to steal money, but the reality is we have to be able to take a moment and step back and ask ourselves, what are these people actually teaching us? Are they going to teach us to reinforce our own beliefs? Are they teaching us their private beliefs? I'm not saying that everybody who is, I know some DOMs, I really don't know what the hell's going on in the Bay Area, because a lot of the problems currently that I'm starting to see in the social media cycle seem to be happening quite a bit in the San Francisco area. Don't know what's happening up there. I only have a couple of people that I know, but the reality is that you look at these styles where their dominance, regardless of gender here doesn't matter, but dominance that have submissives, they're using their submissives to recruit newer submissives, and they're getting involved in these types of play. They are the definitions of human trafficking. I don't like to throw terminology around. I really wish people, number one, unless you're a lawyer or work in law enforcement, don't throw terminology, even if you think it fits. But number two, we shouldn't be recommending to people whether or not you should, unless you're a doctor and their doctor, shouldn't be telling them to stop taking medication. And number three, don't be offering psychological advice to people if you're not a, psychologist or clinician or a licensed care social worker. Nevertheless, sorry for that digression, but the reality is that when we look at these things, we're starting to see these grooming behaviors where they're taking people and investing in time in grooming them for their own sexual gratification, and it really has nothing to do with kink. The problem is that somebody younger, regardless of who they are, if they don't have any onus in learning, but they're putting all of their onus in somebody who's falling on the auspices of, I am a kink educator, I am a community or community leader or community organizer, we tend to allow ourselves a little bit of autonomy thinking that we are going to be okay. And the reality is we're not going to be okay. What's going to end up happening is we're opening ourselves up to potentially this type of behavior. We do have to take a little bit of responsibility. And when somebody is asking us to get involved to maybe do a pickup scene or something else, how we are doing these things, because then we have to assess our own risk. We have to assess if we're putting ourselves in a position that's elevating our risk for potentially something going wrong. I'm not victim blaming at all, because I can kind of, I can always read a room or I can feel tension in the air. When I go and talk to people, when I'm giving, I don't consider myself a kink educator at all, because when I go out, I talk about emotions. I'm a psychological educator, I'm an emotional educator, I'm a trauma educator, because that's where my specialties lie. But I'm certified to do these things. I carry licensures, I carry insurance. I'm registered in three continents, and at least half a dozen countries. That's a lot to do. We don't have anything like that inside of the BDSM or fetish community. We don't, and we never will, because we can't even agree to what is or isn't a rule or what we all want to adhere to. But we have to be very careful. We have to take a moment when we're getting into the lifestyle and we're being overwhelmed with the thoughts of what we're seeing and the play that's going on, and step back for a moment and say, okay, I feel an influx here. My emotions are on high. I'm feeling quite overwhelmed. I need to step back for a moment. I remember the first time I went to a club in Atlanta, and I was enthralled. I was just absolutely in love. I remember there was so many demonstrations happening at once. Somebody on a St. Andrew's cross. There was a rope demonstration going on, and then in the other part of the dungeon there was a demonstration of impact in OTK. OTK stands for over the knee. Then on the other side there was somebody doing electrotorture, and then somebody getting ready to do dominatrix, who was a nurse, getting ready to do needle play. And when I sat back and I was trying to just absorb everything I was seeing, it was such a sensory overload of wanting to be completely immersed, but being so immersed, I was just inundated. And it was overwhelming. And I remember going home over that weekend and talking to my mentor and telling them how I felt and the importance of discussing how I felt during that time. But we don't take these things seriously. We tend to rush in because we're like, okay, great. I saw somebody doing impact play and electrotorture. Boom, I'm in. I want to just let me get my toys for $39.95 and let me start, spanking some ass and shocking some nipples. That'll be fun. Except that we don't understand the safety behind it. We don't understand the impact depth. We don't understand blood pressure and cardiovascular responses. We don't discuss or have conversations about emotional range and or impact of emotions when we are doing or conducting these scenes. We don't talk about the traumas that somebody may have encountered that we're overlooking when we're doing these scenes. And there's an importance to that. Pardon me. I'm not saying that not all kink educators aren't beneficial. And probably more often than not, there are really good ones out there that will teach about rope, or they will teach about, their version of sadism. But you have to remember, whoever you are going to for a demonstration, whoever you're going to sit and listen to that's going to organize something for the community, it is and always will be subjective to their experience. They will be biased towards that experience. And most of all, there's literally no way to certify what they're saying is completely 100% true. It's their truth and it's their belief, but their truth doesn't make it your truth. And I know people are going to say, well, but I know so and so. Well, that's great. You're talking about exceptions, not the rule. BDSM is a global movement, right? Fetish community is global. It's not localized to one little area anywhere. We have to start taking stock, especially on social media, and get to the point where we are questioning these people. The community used to come together when we were at local events or local parties with a small number of people, and people would often just look out. Oh, hi, you're new. And that's it. If you have any questions, we're here. If not, enjoy yourself. I'm not saying, you don't have the best of intentions when you're out there looking out and you want to look out for somebody that's brand new and you want them to kind of hang out with you so they have a little bit of a safe haven. But we have to kind of balance that line. We can't, get to the point where we're manipulating DS dynamics. We can't get to the point where we're starting to manipulate new people coming in or older people that are coming out of bad dynamics and putting all our faith into people just because they teach a class. Hell, they might not even teach the class the way somebody else does. So then the next question becomes, who's right, who's wrong? And that's the problem with all of these things. We just see the term sex educator, community organizer, community leader, and we put a lot of faith into these people. And we're not investing any time in vetting them. We're not investing any time asking around. And I know there's always going to be stories or bitterness with some people or bad breakups. And that's, what you want to do is arm yourself with the best information. There is a difference if I'm going to go sit on a panel and talk about something I personally know about. Like, I'm very adept to interrogation scenes, not only because of my law enforcement background or my military background or my psychological background or other backgrounds that I have. And I talk about all of these things. So that gives me a little bit more credit. But if I'm going to sit there on a panel with some dominance and they're like, yeah, so interrogation, I'm going to throw somebody in a dark room and have a spotlight and, I'm going to give, that's fine. You're talking about a scene. But what about all the safety things we've got to worry about? So discussions are great. But we have to be willing, if a panel we're going to see or an educator we are going to see isn't willing to answer questions or field questions or gets upset when we're asking questions about their background, that's a good indicator that potentially that's not the best person to be taking advice from. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some days I'm tired. Like last weekend, I didn't want to give any talks. I just wanted to kind of reconnect and recharge my batteries within the community and got involved in a discussion that I wrote about that did not end favorably. But the reality was, I wasn't being asked something about the community. I was being asked something private, but I could speak in the capacity of an expert because I know I have years of experience. Now I have thousands of hours of working with clients and talking about the human condition. But when it gets to scenes and stuff like this, all of these things are subjective. I can't tell you that my interrogation scene is the only way to do it, that my version of sadism is the only correct and proper way to do it. I can't tell you negotiating is the only proper way to do it. I can tell you a version and allow you to create your own truth to that and either take this advice and mold it and craft it for your own. But if I start using that and we fall in the gaze of people who are very much enthralled with, oh my God, this is a guru telling me this, I want to learn more, we can, for those in that role, become easily swayed by those who don't know, and it's not an excuse. Then they go ahead and, initiate predatory behavior or initiate sexual behavior that's not recommended, and then they cover it under the guise of BDSM. If this wasn't happening, If these things weren't occurring, I wouldn't have anything to talk about. If these things weren't occurring in our community and affecting people and causing a massive emotional damage, stress, anxiety, depression, there wouldn't be stories within the community. And these stories are widespread. They're ranging now from Frisco to Atlanta. Recently, a club in the UK that I know about, that I've didn't have a chance to go to, but I know who was there, and I understand what's going on, and they're going through trying to figure out how to deal with the situation. To other places in other parts of the world. And we look at all of these things and we're like, oh, but they were a community leader. Okay, great. What does that actually mean? So we have to start taking that onus back, right? We have to start telling ourselves we have to be responsible enough ourselves that if we're going there, we're going to give them our attention and give them our respect and listen and potentially start asking questions. But you can't just swallow everything you're taking, because then you are blinding yourself to the potentiality of any dangers that they themselves or anybody else is warning you against. Even me. Even me. I always challenge people, if you don't understand something I'm saying, question me. Ask me why I'm saying this now. Ask me why I'm talking about emotional depression and detachment in couples. Well, because it's becoming prevalent and it's part of my practice. It's what I'm dealing with. Why am I talking about trauma? Well, that's a great question, because it's starting to happen. People are being sexually assaulted and this is affecting them. Then their sleep patterns and everything else that comes with it. Again, I want to make this clear wholeheartedly. I know some very great, gracious, well-intentioned people within the BDSM community. They don't call themselves educators, they are just demonstrators. They're just demonstrating kink. And maybe that's the terminology we need to start migrating to. They're not an educator, because an educator then is somebody we're putting in a position of power and trust, and we're giving them a whole lot of respect. More often than not, we're giving them a lot of money, right? Self-help gurus, I've talked about this before. We're giving them all of these things. For what? I don't charge for any of the stuff that I give, because I want people to benefit and I want people to draw their own conclusions and find their own source of information and weigh all that information. I'm giving you enough information that if you want to learn more, you can A, research more yourself, B, you can send me a message and I can explain more about what's going on. Or, C, go, hey, you know what? That guy's just crazy. He's batshit wrong, and screw him. I don't want to listen to him anymore. No, that's fine. This is your choice. But I really think we should start moving away from the terminology of calling these people educators, because it does give them a position of power. And they should maybe start looking at the terminology of kink demonstrators, because all they are doing is demonstrating to the rest of us, or those that take their classes and pay their $59.95 or $129.95, whatever some of these outrageous classes cost. We have to keep in mind that all they're doing is demonstrating their beliefs in BDSM, in the kink world, in the fetish community, whether it's latex or DDLG, or if it's rope or it's negotiations. We are only being demonstrated what they want to teach us. And it is a lot to think about. But maybe if we start defusing their power, if we start defusing the title itself, not so much the people that are doing it, but maybe if we defuse the title itself, we allow ourselves a little bit more onus to then make better decisions. We start encouraging people. We get back to the days of old and start handing out the leaflets of information. I know that if I'm at an event and somebody doesn't want to be questioned because they want to be the sole authority of what the hell is going on or what they're dictating, that's probably not a person I'm going to listen to or put much stock or respect into. Because the moment that they tell me I can't question them is the moment that I'm not going to listen to one thing that they're saying, because they are so probably drunk with their own power. They're exuding a person that is going to be potentially harmful to everyone that's listening to them. And that's not something I want to be a part of. That's not something I want a part of our community. And I'm passionate about this stuff. Otherwise, I wouldn't talk about it. Because there is an emotional impact when these people go out there and they abuse people, or they harm people, or they mentally abuse them, or they mentally coerce them, or they mentally manipulate them, or gaslight them. There are all these problems for years on as this damage rolls forward. So what I'm looking at is a way is maybe we start mitigating this somehow. Now, I don't have all the answers, but there's a lot of food for thought here. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are in the comment section where I make my post. I'll leave a comment section open on this podcast episode. And I want to gauge some reactions and hear what people's thoughts and voices are on this subject matter. What do you think about the thought about removing kink educator and more putting it to kink demonstrator? Let me know. Maybe we can start hearing less stories if we remove some of their autonomy, some of their power. Maybe we start hearing less stories of predatory behavior. We start hearing less stories of sexual assault or manipulation or gaslighting or emotional distress coming out of the communities globally. And we start moving back towards a community that's really healthy and positive, fun and enjoyable, that is a safe place for all of us to be. Sounds like something I want to be a part of. What about you? Until next time, everybody, be safe and stay kinky.